montage set to some sort of Deliverance-esque banjo music, the hero fails to give chase to Natasha, and instead instructs his helper to run, at which point they abandon their miniature golf clubs, run to the car, and drive away, obeying the speed limit. Natasha too suffers from ambivalence, as he fails to give chase. Either that, or he just really wanted to play miniature golf. The film goes on in this manner, the protagonist and antagonist alternately running away or chasing, not making any real sense, until we're led to the final showdown scene in which our hero and his friend head to the woods to face Natasha in a climactic battle using fencing foils. That's right, fencing foils. And not just any fencing foils, but fencing foils which our hero and his friend find sticking out of some shrubbery in the woods. Of course, they're very relieved to find these foils, since they somehow neglected to bring any other weapon to the climactic battle with an assassin and his, wait for it, redneck cousin. The cousin introduced in the last scene was played by the redneck friend in such a way that his accent was a total mismatch from Natasha's, and he was also given a redneck name like Jed or Zeke or something stupid. Anyway, the film ends with a fencing foil scene in which the cousin runs off, vanquished by the friend, and Natasha is killed by the cop. Justice is served, everyone can stop alternately running from and chasing after each other, and now the hero can go to the houses of his 3 different groups of friends and tell them the same story about how he totally killed Natasha with a fencing foil. Or maybe he'll just go play some miniature golf. Understandably, the crowd who watched Chris's movie wasn't sure what to make of it. Even the people who were, shall we say, less intellectual seemed a bit let down, as if they couldn't quite put their finger on why it hadn't been as great as Lethal Weapon 2. Compliments rained down on Chris, however, as we all struggled to put some words together. I told him I liked the locations he'd chosen. Other people complimented the acting, which, for the most part, was dreadful. Chris told us cheerfully that he booked the miniature golf course again, at which I almost did one of those comic choking coughs that people let out in movies. You might expect a high rate of attrition for the next rehearsal for a second chance. However, this wasn't the case. Everyone showed up. Not only showed up, but showed up on time with snacks and equipment and enthusiasm. And this is where the worst filmmaker in the world intersects with the version of Chris whom I'd like to call the most effective amateur producer in the world. Chris had charisma, a kind of super charisma that assured you that he was going to get shit done, that he knew what he was doing, and if you worked for him, you would accomplish something too. As lost as I was in my own life at the time, working a part-time job at a daycare center without a bachelor's degree, and a crumbling first marriage rife with codependence and depression, Chris's self-assurance and productivity appealed to me, even if what we were producing was essentially laughable. I don't know why others showed up, but I showed up because I wanted to do something, even if I was just holding a boom mic, which is what I did for the majority of the production. Holding a boom mic, like this, really heavy, started out as a relatively easy job, since our first shoots were largely indoors, dealing with the endless exposition. Quickly, however, it became quite athletic as we moved into chase scenes, and my job became running with a boom mic through forested trails, holding the mic high overhead, trying to avoid both getting into the shot and low-hanging tree branches, while also making sure I didn't trip and fall on the trail. Having been mainly housebound by my depression prior to this, the boom mic work offered a healthy level of activity, sort of my own aerobics regimen. My arms grew stronger. My patience, which had always been great, was a virtue. I never complained. The last day of the shoot was the climactic battle scene, and we were going to get it all done in one day. We gathered early near Chris's apartment and then set off in separate cars to a wooded area just off the main highway north of Bellingham. It was a brief bit of meadow surrounded by short trees next to a small stream, the kind of place where a serial killer might dump his bodies late at night. It turned out that for this version of A Second Chance, our production had upgraded from fencing foils to real replica swords that usually kept pride of place in some uncle's den. Arab guy Marty was just as surprised as I was to learn that he'd be fighting with more or less real swords. And even redneck best friends started getting concerned, perhaps because he was playing the cousin who gets killed. Chris would give a direction, at which point redneck friend would break in and remind Chris that someone could get hurt. In the end, the show went on, and the fighting duos bashed the real swords against each other side to side while jumping over rocks in an icy cold stream. I held the boom mic overhead all the while, my feet slowly going numb. Miraculously, no one got hurt. At the end of the shoot, most people went their separate ways. I never saw most of them again. I never saw the finished film. I did still hang out with Chris and Redneck Friend a few more times. A month later or so, we were already scouting locations for a horror film with an unspecified plot. Chris knew that it would involve 4 friends and a mysterious mountain. I was to write the script. Remarkably, it turned out that Chris never wrote scripts for his films, preferring to let the actors more or less improv all their lines and the scenes to occur to him as they did. The remake of Second Chance only had a script because Chris had copied down the lines from the first film more or less verbatim for the second film. I was going to be his new scriptwriter, and I even started a draft about the 4 friends, heavy on dialogue and internal motivations for why they were camping in the mysterious mountain. The hiking trip to scout locations was the last time I ever saw Chris, though. It was on a mountain overlooking Bellingham with some of the most extraordinary views I've ever seen. We hiked for a long while, and I considered what a pain in the ass it would be lugging a boom mic up those inclines. Still, it was a great day. The sun was shining and the air was the perfect crispness of a Pacific Northwest early fall. But that was the last day. My husband began making noises about finally going off to do the meditation training he'd always dreamed of in Oregon, so we moved to Portland. I left behind my daycare job and the promise of a better job soon at the independent theater in town. And I left behind my potential key role in the production of what could have been my first horror film. Whatever the quality of Chris's filming, I'm sure it would have been made. Sometimes I wonder what Chris is up to and what's become of his work. Has it improved? Did a second chance ever get a third chance? Or has Chris, like so many other people, given up on his dream and shelved it? Did any of his movies survive the shift to DVD and YouTube and Netflix? Is the video store still open? It's a strange relationship I had with the worst filmmaker in the world. No matter how hard I try, there's just no way to disrespect him.